I told you not to do that again. Do you understand me?
Welcome to Stories of Satisfaction.
For years, a powerful billionaire believed his young son was completely deaf and unable to communicate, all based on what his charming and trusted fiancée told him since the child was born. She claimed to care for the boy like a mother, but behind closed doors, she controlled every part of his life, silencing even his smallest attempts to reach out. Everyone believed her story. Everyone, except one person. A quiet maid, new to the household, started noticing something others didn't. The boy's eyes, his subtle movements, and one small, desperate signal that no one else understood. What she discovered would expose years of manipulation, change the life of an innocent child, and force the billionaire to face a heartbreaking truth hidden in plain sight. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. The mansion of Nicholas Reed had always been a quiet place. Since the day Ethan was born, silence filled every room and hallway. His mother had died right after giving birth, leaving behind a deep sadness. Not long after, Nicholas started dating Victoria Hayes. She quickly took on the role of caring for the newborn. Without anyone asking, she offered to help and stayed close to both father and son. People thought she was kind and helpful. She seemed like someone who truly cared about Ethan. But as time passed, the boy didn't grow like other children. He barely spoke and didn't seem to hear well. Doctors said it was probably because of birth trauma. Victoria repeated this idea many times, always saying Ethan's condition could not improve. Nicholas believed her completely. He was always busy with his work, trusting Victoria to manage things at home. The house was always clean, organized, and perfect, but there was a strange feeling behind the calm. Ethan learned early that silence was normal in his world. As a baby, he didn't cry much, and as he grew, he remained very quiet. He watched everything carefully but rarely reacted. People said he was just different, and Victoria made sure they believed that. She told doctors and visitors that Ethan had serious problems, and they accepted what she said. No one questioned her words. Nicholas never doubted her either. He didn't spend much time at home, so he never saw how Ethan truly behaved. Ethan didn't understand everything that was happening around him, but he felt uneasy most of the time. Something wasn't right, but he couldn't explain it. He learned to stay still and not ask for anything. He kept his thoughts to himself and avoided making noise. He lived in a home that looked perfect on the outside but didn't feel safe inside. The silence wasn't peaceful. It felt heavy. Every room seemed to hide something beneath the surface. Victoria's presence was constant. She was always there, managing the house, caring for Ethan, and talking to Nicholas when he came home. She knew exactly how to keep things in order. She smiled often, but her eyes stayed cold. She acted like a caring figure, but Ethan never felt warmth from her. When others visited, she acted like a loving guardian. She talked about Ethan's condition and how she worked hard to care for him. No one doubted her story. Nicholas praised her for her dedication. He believed Ethan was lucky to have her around. But the truth was, Victoria controlled everything. She decided what Ethan could or couldn't do. She chose who could talk to him. She shaped the story of his life and made sure everyone believed it. Ethan had no voice, not because he couldn't speak, but because no one truly listened. His world was shaped by others, especially by Victoria, and there was no room for questions or changes. The mansion looked beautiful and elegant. Every room was perfectly decorated, and the furniture was always clean and polished. But beneath the surface, everything felt unnatural. The silence didn't come from peace. It came from control. Ethan moved carefully through the house, like a shadow. He learned how to avoid making noise. Even his footsteps were quiet. He didn't play, laugh, or cry. He simply existed. Nicholas never noticed this strange behavior. He came and went, focused on his business, trusting that Victoria was doing everything right. Victoria made sure everything looked perfect when he was around. She gave him updates on Ethan, always using the same words. She said he was fragile, that he needed constant care, that he would never be normal. Nicholas nodded and believed her. He didn't have time to look deeper. He didn't see the fear in Ethan's eyes. To him, everything seemed fine. But for Ethan, the mansion was a place where he had to hide who he really was. Ethan didn't go to school like most children. Victoria said he couldn't handle it. She told Nicholas that loud places and many people would be too much for him. So, she kept him at home. She said she would take care of his learning, and Nicholas agreed. Ethan spent his days in silence, watching the world from windows. Sometimes he would try to speak or ask something, but Victoria would tell him to stop. She reminded him he was different, that he wouldn't be understood. Slowly, he stopped trying. He listened to her words and began to believe them. He started to think something was truly wrong with him. He thought he was broken. He didn't know what was real anymore. He accepted the silence as normal. He followed every rule. He didn't complain. He didn't ask questions. He just existed in the quiet house where every day was the same. The world outside kept moving, but Ethan stayed locked in a life shaped by someone else. As Ethan got older, the silence grew stronger. He still couldn't speak freely, not because he lacked the ability, but because he didn't know how to use his voice anymore. He had lived so long under Victoria's rules that he forgot what it meant to be heard. Nicholas remained distant, still trusting that everything was fine. He didn't realize that his son had grown up without real love or freedom. Victoria continued to guide the story, always appearing calm and responsible. She kept the house running, kept Ethan hidden, and made sure Nicholas stayed unaware. Ethan's life continued behind closed doors, where each day blended into the next. No one came to visit anymore. No one asked questions. No one wondered if Ethan was okay. And Ethan, still quiet, still watching, didn't know what life outside the mansion could be like. He only knew silence. He only knew fear, and he only knew the version of the world that Victoria had built for him. When Maria Collins arrived at the mansion, things started to feel a little different. She was the new housekeeper, and her presence brought small changes to the quiet routine of the house. The mansion had always followed a strict and controlled order, but Maria's arrival caused a small shift. She didn't try to change anything on purpose, but her way of doing things made people notice her. In the first few days, she walked through the house, learning her tasks and paying close attention to how things worked. She greeted everyone politely and stayed focused on her duties. But it didn't take long before she started noticing certain details. She saw how Victoria acted differently depending on who was watching. When Nicholas was nearby, Victoria treated Ethan with soft words, gentle movements, and careful praise. She spoke in a calm and loving tone. But when they were alone, Victoria's tone changed. She became cold and impatient. Maria noticed the difference, though she didn't yet understand why. Maria began to observe things more carefully. She didn't talk much, but she paid attention to the way people acted. She noticed that Victoria always seemed to be in control of everything in the house. She gave instructions, organized the rooms, and made sure everything looked perfect. Maria followed the rules and did what she was told. But her eyes kept returning to Ethan and how he behaved when Victoria was around. The boy didn't speak or make noise, but he watched everything quietly. Maria noticed how he flinched slightly when Victoria got too close or raised her voice. Whenever Nicholas entered the room, Victoria's entire attitude changed. She smiled more, spoke kindly to Ethan, and praised him in front of Nicholas. She made it seem like she cared deeply for the boy. Maria didn't say anything about what she saw. She wasn't sure what it all meant yet, but she was starting to feel that things were not as perfect as they seemed. Ethan, who usually kept to himself, began to show a small interest in Maria. He didn't speak to her, but he watched her from a distance. Sometimes when she was cleaning or organizing a room, he would quietly enter and sit nearby. He didn't disturb her, but he seemed curious about her presence. Maria didn't push him away. She didn't speak loudly or act surprised. She simply continued what she was doing and smiled gently in his direction. Slowly, Ethan started moving closer. He didn't say anything, but his eyes followed her, and his body relaxed a little when she was near. Maria noticed this change. She began to feel a quiet connection between them. She didn't ask questions or try to make him talk. She just treated him with calm respect. Even a small nod or glance from Ethan seemed like something important. Maria didn't know his full story, but she could tell that he was used to silence. She didn't want to break it, only to be present. Victoria observed these small interactions closely. She didn't stop them, but she never ignored them either. Whenever she saw Ethan getting near Maria, she smiled and acted friendly. She would say things like, "Ethan seems to like you," or "You have a calming effect on him." Her words were polite, and her voice was pleasant, but her eyes didn't match her tone. There was something sharp in her gaze, as if she was watching for signs of trouble. Maria felt this contrast. She heard Victoria's words, but she also noticed the stiffness in her body, the way she stood just a bit too close, or how she interrupted moments of silence with sudden comments. Still, Maria remained calm. She didn't show fear or confusion. She simply continued her work and responded politely. But deep inside, she was starting to feel the tension. The house was beautiful and quiet, but behind that quiet was something else, something uneasy. Maria couldn't name it yet, but she knew it was there. As the days passed, Maria began to notice more strange patterns. Victoria had a way of appearing whenever Ethan and Maria were in the same room for too long. She never said anything negative, but her timing was too perfect to be coincidence. She would step into the room with a cheerful voice and ask unnecessary questions or offer help that wasn't needed. Ethan would always step back a little when Victoria entered. He didn't run away, but he became still and quiet, even more than usual. Maria paid attention to this reaction. It wasn't fear in a loud, clear way. It was quiet and hidden, but it was there. Victoria always kept control over everything. She never let her image slip, not even for a second. The house stayed clean, the schedule stayed tight, and no one raised their voice. But Maria knew now that silence didn't mean peace. It meant something was being kept inside. Something was being managed very carefully by Victoria, always just under the surface. Despite the controlled environment, some moments between Ethan and Maria continued to grow. They were small, but they mattered. A shared glance, a short walk in the hallway, a pause in front of a window. Ethan didn't talk, but he stayed close, and Maria allowed him that. She didn't force any conversation. She just showed with her actions that she wasn't a threat. Victoria still smiled and nodded when she saw them together, but her eyes told a different story. She watched every movement. Maria felt the pressure, but she didn't back away. She didn't cause trouble or try to change anything directly. She just stayed steady and calm. Ethan continued to respond in his quiet way, and Maria kept paying attention. Even though the house appeared normal, Maria had learned that appearances could lie. The harmony she first saw wasn't real. It was carefully built and maintained. Underneath it, something darker was hiding. And while she didn't yet understand it all, Maria knew she had stepped into a place where silence had many layers. One afternoon, while doing her usual chores around the house, Maria walked through the hallway toward the back rooms. She was carrying some laundry and had plans to clean the guest room after finishing in the main living area. As she passed near the study, she heard low voices. Curious, but not wanting to interrupt, she paused for a moment. Through the slightly open door, she saw Victoria standing close to Ethan. The boy looked nervous and quiet, holding his hands in front of him. He had just tried to make a small gesture toward Victoria, something simple, but instead of responding kindly, Victoria was scolding him. Her tone was quiet but sharp, and her face looked strict. Maria stood still for a moment longer. As soon as Victoria heard footsteps, her voice changed completely. She turned to Ethan, smiled sweetly, and ran her hand through his hair, telling him he should go rest. Maria pretended not to notice, but inside she began to feel uneasy about what she had just seen. Later that day, Maria continued with her cleaning duties. She tried not to think too much about what she had witnessed, but the moment stayed in her mind. She began to notice how Ethan behaved when Victoria was around. There was something strange about the way he reacted to her. When Victoria used a very sweet voice or smiled in a certain way, Ethan would step back or look down. It wasn't a normal response to kindness. It felt like he didn't trust those moments. Maria kept quiet, but watched more closely from then on. Every time Victoria acted too gentle, Ethan seemed uncomfortable. It was clear that he was unsure of how to react. Maria didn't say anything to anyone. She was new in the house and she didn't want to cause problems, but she also couldn't ignore what she saw. Something didn't feel right, and it wasn't just a small problem. It was something deeper, something hidden behind polite words and controlled behavior. Later that same afternoon, Maria went to the guest room to organize some old items that had been stored there. It was a quiet room, not used very often, and full of boxes and forgotten belongings. While sorting through the shelves, she opened a drawer filled with papers. Some of the papers were old reports, notebooks, and medical files. At first, she didn't think much of it, but as she looked closer, she saw that the papers were all about Ethan. There were reports from doctors and notes written by hand. The notes were in Victoria's handwriting. Maria recognized the style and tone. Each note described Ethan's condition, saying he had serious hearing problems. The documents repeated the same thing over and over again, that Ethan couldn't hear properly and would always need special care. Some of the reports looked older, maybe from when Ethan was still a baby. Maria didn't know all the medical terms, but the message was clear. Victoria had been repeating this story for years. As Maria read more of the notes, she began to feel confused. Something about them didn't make sense. There were many papers, but they all seemed to say the same thing. It felt too planned, too controlled. She had expected to see different opinions from different doctors, but the reports all supported the same idea without question. And the handwritten notes were especially strange. They were very detailed and focused more on behavior than on actual test results. Maria didn't fully understand what was wrong yet, but she could tell something wasn't right. She remembered the way Victoria treated Ethan when no one was watching, and now, seeing these papers, she began to wonder if the story about Ethan's hearing was completely true. Maria didn't want to jump to conclusions. She was careful by nature and didn't like to assume things without evidence. But her instincts told her that there were contradictions here. Something in the story Victoria had told the family might not be real. Maria took a deep breath and carefully put the papers back where she had found them. She didn't want anyone to know she had looked through them. At the same time, she couldn't stop thinking about what she had seen. The more she thought about it, the more questions came to her mind. If Ethan really had such serious hearing problems, why did he seem to respond to sounds around him? Why did he react to footsteps, voices, and even small noises in the house? Maria had seen him turn his head at the sound of doors closing or people speaking. These small details made her doubt the medical reports. She started to pay closer attention to Ethan's reactions during the day. She noticed how his eyes moved toward the source of sound, and how he seemed to follow conversations with his eyes. He was quiet, yes, but not completely unresponsive. Maria didn't have proof yet, but she felt more and more certain that something important was being hidden from Nicholas. Even though she didn't fully understand the situation, Maria began to see that things were more complicated than she thought. Victoria had been with the family for a long time and had control over the household. Nicholas trusted her completely, and no one had ever questioned her version of events. Maria realized that it wouldn't be easy to change that. She knew she had to be careful. If Victoria found out that she had read the reports or suspected something, it could create tension or worse. So Maria kept quiet, but her eyes were now open. She went on with her duties as usual, acting normal and polite. But her thoughts kept returning to Ethan. She wondered what his life had really been like all these years. She didn't know what she would do yet, or if she could do anything at all. But she knew one thing for sure. The version of Ethan's story that Victoria told the world might not be the full truth. Maria was walking through one of the hallways when she saw something unusual. Victoria was on the phone, standing near a window, speaking in a calm voice. Ethan was close by, sitting on a chair not far from her. While Victoria continued her phone conversation, Maria noticed Ethan trying to make a small gesture with his hand. It wasn't random. It looked like he was trying to communicate something. His eyes were focused, and he moved his hand slowly, as if checking to see if anyone was watching. But before he could complete the gesture, he suddenly stopped. Maria realized why. Victoria had turned her head slightly, giving Ethan a sharp look. Her expression wasn't loud or angry, but it was enough to make Ethan stop immediately. Then, Victoria walked over to him and gently placed her arms around him. From a distance, it looked like a kind gesture, like she was comforting him. But her mouth moved slightly, and her voice, though quiet, seemed serious and firm. Maria kept watching but said nothing. After a moment, Victoria ended her phone call and continued with her usual tasks. Maria, however, could not stop thinking about what she had seen. Ethan had tried to express something, and it wasn't the first time she had noticed him trying to communicate in quiet ways. This time, though, his fear had been clear. Maria could sense that the hug he received wasn't about comfort. It was more like a warning. Later, when Maria and Ethan were alone, he didn't try to repeat the gesture. He stayed quiet, looking down most of the time. Maria didn't ask him anything, but her thoughts were full of questions. Why was Ethan afraid to make that sign? Why did Victoria act so differently when others were watching? Maria felt more certain that something wasn't right. She began to wonder if Ethan had his own way of trying to speak, and whether someone had been trying to stop him for a long time. That evening, after finishing her work for the day, Maria went to her room. She sat down and searched for information about how children with communication difficulties express themselves. She didn't know exactly what to look for, but she typed words like non-verbal children and hand signs used by kids with speech blocks. She found articles and videos about children who couldn't speak, but used simple, improvised gestures to communicate. As she read more, she remembered how Ethan had moved his hand earlier that day. Some of the signs used by other children looked similar. Maria began to realize that Ethan might not be as disconnected as people said. Maybe he had been trying to speak in his own way, and nobody had taken the time to understand. Or maybe someone had noticed, and they didn't want anyone else to see. Maria continued reading late into the night, going through examples of how children express needs or feelings without using words. What she saw reminded her more and more of Ethan. In the next days, Maria began observing Ethan more closely. She didn't say anything about what she had read. She didn't want to raise suspicion, especially around Victoria. But whenever she had the chance to be near Ethan, she watched how he reacted to things. She noticed something new. Ethan responded to sound. It wasn't obvious, but it was there. One morning, Maria dropped a small spoon by accident. It made a soft sound when it hit the floor. Ethan turned his head quickly in the direction of the sound. Later, when she knocked gently on the table to test a theory, she saw Ethan's eyes move. His reactions were small, but they were real. If he were truly deaf, he wouldn't have reacted like that. Maria didn't talk to anyone about this. Instead, she quietly kept track of every small moment, building a clearer picture in her mind. She had been told he couldn't hear anything, but now she was starting to doubt that completely. Maria also began to notice how Ethan changed depending on who was around. When Victoria was nearby, Ethan was stiff, quiet, and careful with every movement. But when Maria was alone with him, he sometimes relaxed a little. He still didn't speak, and he didn't always try to communicate, but he seemed more open. He would glance at her longer, follow her movements with his eyes, and sometimes stand near her without hesitation. Maria felt he was trying to trust her, even if he didn't fully know how. Each day, she saw more signs that challenged the idea that he was completely unresponsive. If he was aware of sound and tried to communicate with gestures, why had everyone accepted that he was completely deaf and unable to express himself? Maria didn't have all the answers yet, but she now believed there was a serious problem with the story people had been told. She wasn't sure what her next step should be, but she knew she had to stay alert and keep learning more. Everything Maria saw and read helped her realize that Ethan's situation was more complex than anyone admitted. Victoria had shaped the way everyone viewed the boy. From the outside, it seemed like she was taking good care of him, but Maria had now seen moments that showed a different side. Victoria stopped Ethan's gestures. She gave him sharp looks. She changed her voice when others were around. And everyone believed her when she said Ethan was completely deaf and incapable of change. But Maria was beginning to see signs that told a different story. Ethan wasn't completely disconnected from the world. He noticed things, responded to sounds, and tried to communicate in his own way. Maria didn't want to act too soon, but she couldn't ignore what she now knew. The pieces didn't fit, and something important was being hidden. For now, she would continue watching, listening, and collecting what she could. Because the more she saw, the more she understood that Ethan's truth had been covered by someone else's version of reality. Maria felt it was time to speak directly with Nicholas. She believed he needed to hear what she had been noticing about Ethan. She waited for a moment when Victoria was not in the room and approached him calmly. Nicholas was sitting in his office, going through some papers. Maria spoke carefully, explaining that she had seen Ethan react to sound more than once. She described small situations, like the boy turning his head at a spoon falling or reacting to knocks. She told him it didn't seem like Ethan was completely deaf. But before she could say much more, Victoria walked in. She smiled politely and asked what they were discussing. When Maria mentioned Ethan again, Victoria quickly interrupted. She said Maria didn't understand children with special needs and that these reactions were normal in such cases. Nicholas looked unsure but nodded slowly. He told Maria that Victoria had known Ethan since he was born and likely understood him better. Maria felt her words had been dismissed too quickly. After that conversation, Maria remained quiet, but she paid even more attention to what was happening in the house. She noticed how Victoria always had a way of staying in control. A few hours after the talk with Nicholas, Maria passed by a hallway near the living room and saw Victoria speaking to Ethan. Her voice was low and sharp. She wasn't yelling, but her tone was firm and serious. She told Ethan to stay quiet and to keep himself controlled. Her words were not kind, but when Maria stepped into the hallway, Victoria immediately changed her voice and touched Ethan's hair gently, pretending to comfort him. She acted as if nothing had happened, smiling softly. Ethan didn't move or say anything. He stood still and didn't meet anyone's eyes. Maria walked past them without saying a word, but inside, she felt a growing concern. It was clear that Ethan acted differently when Victoria was around, and the difference was too strong to ignore anymore. Maria continued with her duties, trying not to let her worry show. She stayed focused and quiet, but her mind kept going back to the way Victoria treated Ethan when no one was around. One afternoon, Maria went to clean Ethan's room. She wanted to make sure everything was neat as usual. While organizing the shelves and drawers, she found something unexpected. In a small space between the bed and the wall, hidden under some papers, she discovered several drawings. The papers were folded and worn, like they had been hidden for a long time. Maria opened them slowly. The drawings were simple but powerful. Most of them showed a female figure, always with a cold, serious face. Some of the figures looked angry. The expressions were dark, not friendly. Maria understood that Ethan had been drawing his feelings. He had no words to use, but he was trying to say something. These drawings were not just pictures, they were messages. They showed fear. They showed someone trying to express pain. Maria didn't show the drawings to anyone. She carefully folded them back and kept them hidden. She didn't want Victoria to find out that she had seen them. She knew by now that Victoria controlled many things in the house, including how people saw Ethan. Maria felt that if Victoria knew about the drawings, she might make them disappear, just like she had tried to dismiss the conversation with Nicholas. Maria looked again at the drawings and realized that Ethan had probably been trying to communicate for a long time. He had been using signs, sounds, small movements, and now drawings, but every time he tried, someone stopped him. Someone made him feel like he should stay quiet, and so he had learned to keep everything inside. He had learned that silence was safer. Maria felt a deep sadness as she looked at the papers. She realized how much Ethan had been holding back, and she also realized how hard it must be to live every day without being heard. Maria now understood the silence in the house was not normal. It wasn't the quiet that came from peace. It was the quiet that came from fear and control. She could see that Ethan had been living like this for years, not because he wanted to, but because he had no other choice. Victoria had shaped the way people saw Ethan. She had repeated the same story for so long that even Nicholas believed it without question. But Maria had seen enough to know it wasn't the full truth. She didn't know how much Nicholas really understood, or if he even wanted to see it. But Maria couldn't ignore what she now knew. She had seen Ethan's reactions, heard his attempts, and found his drawings. It was clear to her that the boy was trying, over and over again, to be seen and heard. He had lived for so long in silence, not because of a physical condition, but because someone had kept his voice hidden. In the following days, Maria continued doing her work as usual. She cleaned, organized, and followed the daily routines, but she also stayed close to Ethan whenever she could. She didn't push him or ask him anything directly. She simply stayed present. She wanted him to know that someone saw him. She wanted him to feel safe enough to try again, in his own way. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know if Nicholas would ever listen fully, or if Victoria would realize that someone was slowly seeing through her actions. But Maria knew she couldn't pretend anymore. She had seen too much to stay silent. She didn't have a plan yet, and she didn't want to cause a fight, but she knew one thing. Ethan had been trying to break the silence for a long time. He had been using the only tools he had. And now that someone had finally noticed, maybe, just maybe, he would have a small chance to be understood. Maria continued to watch Ethan carefully during quiet parts of the day. She didn't force anything, and she didn't change her routine. She simply paid attention. Whenever she had the chance to be near him, she listened and watched for his reactions. Over time, she noticed something important. Ethan reacted to sounds. Not all sounds, but certain ones. When a door creaked or a spoon hit the floor, Ethan would move his head slightly, or his eyes would shift. These weren't big movements, but they were clear enough for someone who was paying close attention. Maria didn't say anything out loud, but inside, she was sure that he could hear at least a little. He wasn't completely deaf like everyone believed. She saw him react more than once, especially to sudden or unexpected noises. These reactions weren't guesses, they were real responses. Maria started to build a mental list of everything she saw. Each new detail made her more confident that the truth about Ethan was being hidden. One day, when Maria and Ethan were alone, something unusual happened. They were in the hallway near the stairs. It was quiet, and no one else seemed to be nearby. Ethan stood still for a moment, looking around. Then he made a fast movement with his hands. It was a short, sharp gesture. Nothing dramatic, but it had meaning. Maria didn't ignore it. She looked at him and gently nodded, trying not to scare him. She had read enough and seen enough to believe that this was not random. It looked like he was asking for help. His face showed tension, and his eyes didn't move away from hers. It was quick, and he stopped the gesture almost immediately, as if he was afraid someone would see. Maria didn't say anything in that moment, but she felt shaken. This wasn't just about hearing or reacting to sounds anymore. Ethan was trying to say something important. It was like a message, a signal, and Maria took it seriously. Later, Maria decided to speak to Nicholas again. She waited until she could find him alone and tried to explain what she had seen. She told him about Ethan's reactions to sound and the gesture he had made. She spoke carefully, repeating that she believed Ethan could hear at least a little and was trying to communicate in his own way. But once again, the conversation didn't last long. Victoria came in shortly after Maria had started. As before, she took control of the situation. She smiled politely and said Maria was misunderstanding the boy's behavior. According to her, Ethan often copied random movements and didn't understand what he was doing. Victoria told Nicholas that it was easy for someone unfamiliar with special needs to get confused. Nicholas looked unsure. He didn't ignore Maria completely, but he didn't seem ready to question Victoria either. Maria felt frustrated. She had tried twice now, and both times her words had been pushed aside before she could explain everything fully. In the days that followed, Victoria began acting differently around Maria. On the surface, she remained polite and calm. She spoke kindly, gave instructions in her usual voice, and kept the daily routine the same. But Maria could feel the change. Victoria watched her more closely. She often appeared suddenly in places where Maria was working. If Maria was cleaning near Ethan's room, Victoria would appear there too. If Maria walked through the hallway, Victoria would find a reason to follow. The control wasn't obvious, but it was there. Maria understood that Victoria was watching her. Still, Maria kept her calm. She did her work as usual and didn't let Victoria see her concern. Inside, she was more focused than ever. She paid even more attention to Ethan. She didn't talk much, but she listened to every sound and movement. When no one was around, she looked for small signs. And Ethan continued to show little reactions, turning his head, blinking at sharp sounds, or pausing when something unexpected happened. Maria continued building her quiet understanding of Ethan. She didn't write anything down, but she remembered every reaction and every moment. Slowly, she began to test small things during short interactions. She would tap the table gently or let an object fall near him. Each time, Ethan responded. Sometimes it was a small head turn, other times a quick glance. It was enough. Maria didn't need more to be convinced. She knew now with complete certainty that Ethan could hear, at least in part. It was no longer a guess or a question. The idea that he was completely deaf was false. Someone had created that idea and repeated it so often that no one had doubted it until now. Maria didn't understand why Victoria had done this, but she knew it was not a simple mistake. It had been done on purpose. The more Maria thought about it, the clearer it became. Someone had shaped Ethan's silence, and now Maria was beginning to see just how deep that silence went. With each new day, Maria's certainty grew stronger. What had once been small doubts had become clear facts in her mind. Ethan had been misunderstood, or perhaps deliberately misrepresented, for a long time. She couldn't say how far back it went, but it was clear that this silence had been built over time. Maria felt a responsibility she had not expected when she first came to the house. She didn't know what she could do yet, but she knew she couldn't let it go. Something was wrong, and Ethan was living in the middle of it. He had been trying to ask for help in the only ways he could, and most people had failed to see it. But Maria had seen it. She had heard it, and she wasn't going to forget. She didn't act right away. She didn't confront anyone or raise her voice. But inside, she had made a decision. She would keep watching, keep learning, and keep protecting the truth she had begun to uncover. One night, Maria finally found a moment when she could talk to Nicholas without being interrupted. It was late, and the house was quiet. Victoria was not around, so Maria took the chance to speak calmly and seriously. She brought with her some of the things she had collected, photos, drawings, and notes. She showed Nicholas the drawings that Ethan had hidden, especially the ones showing the female figure with threatening expressions. She also explained in detail the moments when she had seen Ethan respond to sounds. She mentioned how he had turned his head when objects fell and how he reacted to quiet knocks. She told Nicholas about the gesture Ethan had made, which she believed was a signal for help. Nicholas listened, and his face showed surprise. But even after hearing everything, he did not fully agree. He looked unsure. He had known Victoria for a long time and still trusted her deeply. It was difficult for him to believe something so different from what he always thought. While Nicholas was trying to process what Maria said, Victoria appeared suddenly. She walked in without warning and looked at both of them. She didn't raise her voice, but her words were sharp. She said that Maria was creating problems on purpose. According to her, Maria was trying to bring confusion into the house to make herself more important. Victoria claimed Maria wanted to create division between the family members. Nicholas stayed quiet during most of her speech, listening but not reacting much. He looked uncomfortable and didn't know who to believe. Victoria kept talking, saying Maria had misunderstood Ethan and was taking things too far. She reminded Nicholas that she had raised Ethan since he was born, and that she understood his needs better than anyone. Maria stood there, not saying anything for the moment. She realized that anything she said right then might not help. Victoria's words had a strong effect on Nicholas, and it was clear that her influence was still powerful. Shortly after this tense moment, Ethan disappeared from inside the house. No one saw him leave, but Maria noticed he was missing. She searched quietly and found him outside in the garden. It was dark, and the air was cold. Ethan was near the wooden bench, sitting with his knees pulled close to his chest. His body was shaking, and he looked scared. Maria walked toward him slowly, so she wouldn't startle him. When she got closer, Ethan made the same quick gesture with his hands that he had made before, the one Maria believed meant danger or a cry for help. She didn't speak loudly or panic. She just knelt beside him and stayed close. In that moment, she fully understood the weight of the situation. This wasn't just about misunderstandings or small doubts. Something serious was happening, and Ethan was trying to reach out. Maria knew now that she couldn't rely only on conversations. She would need to collect real proof if she wanted to protect Ethan. After bringing Ethan back inside and making sure he was safe, Maria made a decision. She would begin to document everything more carefully. Up until now, she had kept mental notes and saved only a few things like drawings and personal observations. But now she realized that wasn't enough. If she wanted Nicholas to believe her, and if she wanted to help Ethan in any real way, she would need more than words. She started writing down every reaction, every sound Ethan responded to, and every small detail that seemed important. She also saved any small drawings she found, no matter how simple they looked. She kept everything hidden and organized. She didn't know yet what she would do with all the information, but she knew it might become important. She had already seen how quickly Victoria could twist a situation and take control. Maria didn't want to be caught unprepared. She knew she needed strong evidence, something Nicholas couldn't ignore or deny, even under Victoria's pressure. As the days went by, Maria's notebook began to fill. She wrote short but clear notes about things she observed. Ethan responding to footsteps, glancing at sudden noises, or stopping in reaction to voices. She recorded every time he made that familiar hand gesture. She also described how Victoria behaved when her voice changed, when she suddenly appeared during quiet moments, and how her actions shifted depending on who was watching. Maria kept her notes simple and to the point. She also took photos when she could, carefully and without drawing attention. Some photos showed Ethan's drawings, others were of small moments she thought might be useful later. Maria didn't show these things to anyone yet. She was waiting. She wanted to be sure. But every day that passed gave her more reason to continue. She could no longer pretend things were normal. Victoria's control over the house and over Nicholas was too strong. Maria knew she had to build something solid before speaking again. She needed to be ready. Maria now understood that proving the truth wouldn't be easy. Victoria had been in control of the family's story for years. Nicholas trusted her because of their long history, and Ethan had never been given the space to speak for himself. But Maria had seen too much to ignore it. The situation was not just about suspicion anymore. It was about a child who had been silenced. Maria believed Ethan had been trying to communicate for a long time. He had tried with drawings, with hand signs, and even with his reactions to sound. But no one had really listened. Maria didn't feel angry. She felt responsible. She had seen what others had missed, and now she was the only one who could do something. She wasn't sure when or how, but she was preparing. Her careful records, her quiet observations, and her growing collection of evidence were all part of something bigger. Maria was no longer just watching. She was getting ready to act, no matter how hard it might be. Maria felt that she needed help. Everything she had been observing in the mansion was serious, and she knew she couldn't deal with it alone. She decided to contact a friend who worked as a social worker. Her goal was to ask for advice, not to make a formal report. She only wanted to understand the best way to proceed without causing harm to Ethan. However, when she finally managed to speak to her friend, she received unexpected news. Victoria had already contacted the social services. She had described Maria as someone who acted irresponsibly and confused the boy with strange ideas. Victoria said Maria was interfering in delicate matters and creating tension in the household. These accusations created doubt around Maria's actions and made it very hard for anyone to take her seriously. Her plan to quietly seek help was blocked before it could begin. Now, Maria understood more clearly how far Victoria was willing to go to protect the story she had built around Ethan. When Maria returned to the mansion, she noticed right away that something had changed. Ethan, who had started to trust her even a little, now seemed scared again. He avoided eye contact and didn't come near her like before. His body was tense, and his hands stayed close to his chest. He looked like he didn't know who he could trust. Maria didn't push him. She kept her distance, but stayed nearby, hoping he would feel safe again with time. As the day continued, she also noticed tension between Victoria and Nicholas. They weren't shouting, but their voices carried a different tone. Behind a closed door, Maria heard the sounds of a private argument. It didn't last long, but it was clear that something was being questioned. Nicholas had begun to notice inconsistencies in the medical reports. He had started to compare older documents and noticed that not everything added up. Maria didn't know exactly what he had found, but she could tell that his trust in Victoria was starting to shake. When Maria saw a quiet moment later that day, she approached Nicholas again. She had more evidence now, things she had collected over the past few days. She showed him notes where she had written down the specific sounds Ethan had responded to. She explained how he turned his head when doors closed, or how he reacted to objects falling. She also shared details of their brief interactions, including the hand gesture Ethan had repeated more than once. Maria spoke calmly, without pushing Nicholas. She knew she couldn't make him change his mind all at once, but she wanted to give him facts that couldn't be ignored. Nicholas listened carefully. He didn't speak much, but he looked thoughtful. He asked a few questions about the times and situations Maria described. His voice didn't sound angry, just confused. He was starting to doubt the version of events he had always believed. Maria could see that he was still unsure, but he was no longer completely on Victoria's side. Over the next few days, the atmosphere inside the house changed a lot. Everything felt heavier. There was tension in the air, and people moved more carefully, especially when Victoria was around. She started acting differently, switching between two very opposite moods. Sometimes she was extremely affectionate with Ethan, calling him sweet names, hugging him and speaking softly. At other times, she showed a cold attitude. Her voice became firm, and her expressions looked tired and irritated, especially when Ethan didn't follow her instructions exactly. These changes happened quickly, and it was hard to know which version of her would appear next. Maria watched everything closely. She didn't interfere, but she kept recording in her notes. She paid attention to every detail, how Ethan reacted to Victoria's behavior, how often Nicholas stayed home, and what moments seemed to matter most. The more time passed, the more Maria realized that the truth was coming to the surface slowly, but the process would not be easy or fast. Maria also started noticing small changes in Nicholas. He wasn't openly challenging Victoria yet, but he seemed more distant when speaking to her. Sometimes he would stop and look at Ethan for longer periods, as if trying to understand him better. He seemed less sure of the things Victoria told him. Once, Maria saw him quietly observing Ethan from a doorway, not saying anything. It was the kind of silence that came from thinking deeply. Nicholas still didn't say anything to Maria directly, but his actions were showing that he was questioning things. Meanwhile, Victoria seemed to sense the change. She tried to maintain control by staying close to both Nicholas and Ethan. Her voice became more careful, and she used more sweet gestures in front of others. But when she thought no one was watching, her expressions would harden. Maria noticed it all. She felt the pressure growing in the house, like something important was getting closer. But she also knew things could turn worse before they got better. Every night, Maria reviewed her notes. She looked over everything she had written, checking that the information was clear. She wanted to be ready in case Nicholas asked for more. She also kept an eye on Ethan, watching for signs of fear or new reactions. He was still quiet, but sometimes his eyes followed her for a second longer than before, like he remembered she was on his side. Maria didn't try to rush anything. She just stayed steady. She knew that one wrong move could push everything back. Victoria was watching more than ever, and her power in the house was still strong. But Maria also knew that the truth was no longer invisible. Nicholas had seen enough to begin asking questions. The next steps would be hard, but the silence around Ethan had already started to break. Maria didn't know what would happen next, but she had chosen to stay, to continue watching, and to protect every piece of truth she had gathered. She wasn't giving up. Nicholas had been feeling unsure for days. After hearing Maria's quiet but firm observations and noticing the inconsistencies in old medical reports, he decided to do something different. He wanted to see things for himself. So, he chose not to inform Victoria. Instead, he stayed inside the house that day, moving quietly through the hallways, listening and watching when no one knew he was there. It wasn't long before he saw something he couldn't ignore. He found Victoria in a room with Ethan. She was speaking in a low, firm voice, asking him to hide his hands. Ethan had been making small movements, perhaps gestures like the ones Maria had described. When a sudden sound happened nearby, something falling on the floor, Ethan turned his head quickly. Instead of comforting him, Victoria scolded him, as if reacting to sound was a mistake. Nicholas was shocked. He stepped forward immediately, demanding to know what was happening. His voice was calm, but his expression showed anger and confusion at the same time. Maria had been walking in the hallway when she heard Nicholas raise his voice. She approached quietly and saw the situation unfold. This was the moment she had been preparing for. Without waiting to be asked, she brought the notebook where she had kept all her records. She stood beside Nicholas and began to read from her notes. She didn't guess or exaggerate. She listed specific events, the times Ethan had reacted to sound, the drawings that showed fear, the gestures that seemed like messages. She also spoke about the way Victoria's behavior changed, depending on who was watching, and how her influence had shaped the way people viewed Ethan. Maria explained that from the beginning, Victoria had repeated the same story over and over, that Ethan was deaf, that he couldn't communicate, that he would never improve. But nothing Maria had observed supported that version. Her voice stayed calm, and her words were simple. She wanted Nicholas to see the truth clearly, without confusion. As Nicholas listened to Maria's careful explanation, something changed. He began to look at Ethan differently. For the first time, he focused fully on his son, not through the filter of what others told him, but with his own eyes. Ethan was quiet, standing near the table, watching everything closely. Then, something powerful happened. Ethan made the same hand gesture Maria had described, the one she believed meant danger or fear. He looked straight at his father while doing it. Then, as if trying to prove something important, Nicholas gently tapped the wooden table. It was a small sound, not loud. Ethan blinked and turned his head slightly toward it. There was no doubt he had heard it. The room went quiet for a second. Nicholas didn't speak right away, but his face showed how deeply this moment affected him. Everything he had believed for years now seemed uncertain. He had just seen his son react to sound with his own eyes. There was no more space for doubt. Victoria tried to respond quickly. She spoke with urgency, saying everything she had done was to protect Ethan. She claimed she had only wanted to help him live a quiet, peaceful life, but her words didn't make sense. They came too fast and didn't match what Nicholas had just seen. She said that Ethan sometimes copied movements without understanding them. She added that hearing reactions could be random, but her tone wasn't steady anymore. It was nervous, and her sentences didn't connect well. Nicholas didn't reply immediately. He listened, but his eyes stayed on Ethan. The boy looked tired, confused and unsure, but he was standing there, clearly present, aware and responsive. Maria didn't interrupt. She let the silence fill the room after Victoria's speech. Nicholas slowly looked at her and then back at Victoria. His expression was no longer uncertain. He was starting to see the full picture. All the moments, all the signs he had ignored or misunderstood, now they were becoming clear, right in front of him. The weight of what Nicholas was realizing began to settle in. He remembered every time he had trusted Victoria without question. He thought about all the years Ethan had lived under strict control, being treated as if he were completely unable to connect with the world. Nicholas now saw that much of what he believed had been shaped by Victoria's words and actions. She had told him Ethan needed special care. She had said Ethan was different in ways that could not be changed, and for so long Nicholas had accepted this without seeing for himself. Now, everything looked different. Ethan was not without awareness. He was not completely silent by nature. He had been silenced. And the person who claimed to care the most had been the one controlling that silence. Nicholas felt regret, but he also felt responsible. He had allowed this to continue by not asking questions earlier. Looking at Ethan, he saw not a broken child, but one who had been misunderstood and ignored. The atmosphere in the room was heavy. Victoria stood still, as if waiting for someone to say something. Ethan looked from his father to Maria, not speaking, but clearly sensing something important was happening. Nicholas took a long breath. He didn't speak loudly. He simply turned to Maria and nodded slowly, a quiet signal that he now understood. There was still much to figure out, but one thing was clear. Ethan's condition had been misrepresented, maybe even invented. Nicholas didn't have all the answers yet, but he had seen and heard enough to know that something very wrong had happened. Victoria no longer looked confident. Her usual calm expression was gone. She tried to speak again, but her words didn't carry the same power anymore. Nicholas had finally opened his eyes to the truth that Maria had worked hard to show him, the truth that Ethan had tried in his own way to express for years, the truth that could no longer be hidden or denied. After everything became clear, Nicholas made a final decision. He asked Victoria to leave the mansion. There was no more discussion. He didn't want to hear more explanations or justifications. The trust that had lasted for many years was gone. He now saw what had really been happening under his roof. Victoria had built a version of Ethan's life that was not true, and she had done it with control and manipulation. Nicholas told her firmly that her presence in the house was no longer welcome. She didn't fight back the way she usually did. Maybe she knew the truth had already taken over, and there was nothing more to say. After she left, the house felt different. It was still quiet, but it was no longer the same kind of silence. Nicholas didn't waste time. He started searching for professionals, people who could evaluate Ethan properly. He wanted real answers based on facts. He wanted to help his son, truly, for the first time. Nicholas found a team of specialists to work with Ethan. They ran tests, watched his reactions, and studied his behavior. The results were very clear. Ethan had normal hearing. His ears worked, and he could process sound. The problem wasn't physical, it was emotional. The doctors explained that his silence was caused by deep emotional blocks. These had been formed over many years of fear, control, and confusion. Ethan had learned not to respond, not to speak, and not to react because he had been trained to live that way. It wasn't his fault. With the right support, he could change. The doctors recommended a plan that included therapy, hearing exercises, and a stable routine with people he trusted. Nicholas agreed to everything. He finally understood how serious the situation was. It would take time, but there was hope. For the first time in a long while, hope felt real. Ethan wasn't broken. He had just been silenced for too long. Now it was time to begin again. At first, progress was slow. Ethan didn't talk, but he began to respond more clearly to sound. A dropped pencil, the soft ring of a bell, even a quiet voice calling his name. These sounds started to matter to him. His eyes moved, his head turned, and sometimes he made small vocal sounds. Maria was there every day, watching and helping. She never rushed him. She always spoke calmly and waited for his response. The therapists came regularly and worked with him using simple tools. They clapped, tapped, and played soft music. Over time, Ethan reacted more. Then after many days of quiet work, he said a word. It wasn't loud or clear, but it was a word. Nicholas and Maria heard it and felt a wave of emotion. It was a beginning. Slowly, other sounds came. They were not full sentences, but they were important steps. For Ethan, every word was a victory. He was learning that he was allowed to speak now, and that someone would listen. Maria became a very important part of Ethan's recovery. She had already earned his trust, and now she became someone he could depend on during this new phase. She was patient, consistent, and kind. She followed the therapist's instructions and created daily routines that helped Ethan feel safe. She spoke to him gently, gave him time to respond, and praised every small improvement. Ethan stayed close to her. He seemed more relaxed when she was nearby. She helped him with simple tasks, like identifying sounds or repeating short words. Maria also helped Nicholas understand how to support his son. She explained what the therapists were doing and showed him how to practice exercises at home. With her help, Ethan's days became more structured, and progress became easier to see. Maria didn't take over. She simply stood beside Ethan, giving him the steady support he had never had before. For the first time, the boy felt cared for without pressure. He was finally surrounded by kindness, not control. The mansion slowly changed. It had once been filled with quiet that felt heavy and strange. Now, the silence was different. It was peaceful, not forced. The rooms that once held fear now held therapy sessions, games, and gentle conversations. Ethan's laughter came in short bursts, and his voice, although still quiet, was heard more often. Nicholas changed too. He spent more time at home and learned how to interact with his son. He rearranged his schedule so he could be part of Ethan's daily life. He sat with him during meals, joined his therapy sessions, and read books with him at bedtime. The relationship between them began to grow, little by little. Nicholas was not trying to fix his son. He was learning how to be present, how to support, and how to understand him. The house became a place of healing. Everyone who walked through it could feel the difference. It was no longer ruled by fear or false beliefs. It had become a real home again. Time passed, and the changes continued. Ethan was still recovering, but the signs of progress were clear. He spoke more, reacted faster, and showed more emotion. He smiled more often and began to explore rooms he used to avoid. Nicholas continued to support him, learning from the therapists and from Maria. The three of them, Nicholas, Maria, and Ethan, formed a new kind of family. It wasn't perfect, and some days were still hard, but they moved forward together. The pain from the past didn't disappear, but it didn't control them anymore. Victoria's influence was no longer present, and the false story she had created was gone. In its place, a new life was growing, slowly, honestly, and with care. The mansion, once filled with secrets and silence, was now full of learning and recovery. And in the center of it all was Ethan, a boy who had spent years unheard, now finding his voice, one word at a time. Peace didn't come all at once, but it finally had a place to stay. Finally, we've reached the end of this story. I'm extremely happy that you've made it this far. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Now that you've finished watching this incredible story, click on my profile picture and access my videos. I'm sure you'll be enchanted by all the good stories about justice and kindness. Enjoy. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.